Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, of course. You good old boys in Canada, we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, on a beautiful April the 7th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we got a rainy day down here in the south as the weather's become a little inclement. I guess you call it springtime weather. But, as we look at this horrific conditions of the United States with this pandemic that's going on, and all our great healthcare professionals out there working tirelessly every day, Charlton, hoping to stem the tide of this pandemic that's going on, and going to work and working effortlessly, taking care of those American citizens, Charlton, that they've signed up to do. And they don't look at political lines, they don't look at racial lines, Charlton. They just look at the health lines.
They're just doing their job. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you got to have a smart TV or you won't see the thing that you need to see. Also, I want to make sure, especially as we pause for this climate that we're in, we do not have our heads in the sand. This Veterans Crisis Line, they are there where they can help people. They are really experienced at helping veterans and their loved ones, but they can expand that to helping a lot of people during this COVID outbreak. Big C, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, as we think of so many of our veterans in this country, they're actually in the line of fire of this pandemic. When you think about how many veterans are homeless and shelterless in America and don't have health care, and when you think about them being in unsanitary conditions, Charlton, they're in the front line in a fight with this pandemic on a daily basis just to survive.
Yeah.
As we think about American citizens, and all of us are American citizens that have to go through these horrific times, these veterans that are homeless, who are destitute, are even more in peril than the rest of the citizens of America, Charlton. You think about how many of them rely on soup lines just to survive and eat in this country, and now they don't have sanitary conditions to protect themselves against this pandemic. I know we give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, but in these troubled times, many people can't think of calling a phone number. They're trying to see what they can do to get through everyday life.
Yeah.
And so as we think about our veterans as well as the rest of American citizens every day, we just have to look at how much of a toll this is taking on everybody mentally and physically.
Yes, very well said, and we will get through it. Again, for people going through any kind of issues, don't be embarrassed. Just pick up the phone and call 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. And we know it's going to help a lot of people. They just got to pick up the phone and make the call. Big C, I want to just ask you, I want to get your thoughts on something. I know we're not medical doctors. I know we don't have a license to practice medicine. I know we've seen people on TV play like they're doctors, etc. And sometimes people stand up in the pulpit and say they're going to pray for your healing. I want to just make sure, again, I'm just thinking about you, making sure you take care of all the medical things going on right now too. And there was a pastor, because I'm really speaking to all communities. There's a pastor, happened to be a Caucasian guy, even though we're two African Americans. Well, a pastor from Virginia, he decried that the coronavirus was a hoax. And he ended up going down to Mardi Gras. And, of course, they let Mardi Gras go on because they really didn't take it serious. And they're saying they got wrong information. Whatever happened, happened. But this pastor, he ended up passing away from COVID-19. And the thing about that is you and I were talking about what's more important, your health or your money. And at first, the people were saying, well, the money's more important. We got to play the games. But more salient minds came together and they said, well, your health is more important. But then I asked you the question yesterday. It's about faith. Is faith more important than science? Because some people are still holding congregations, even though a pastor passed away after attending Mardi Gras from COVID-19. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I answered your question about faith yesterday, Charlton. Everyone says they're going to put it in faith, and they're going to believe in just faith. And I answered that question. If faith is all you need to believe in, then go to the edge of a tall building and jump off the edge of that building, Charlton, and see if faith will catch you at the end of that fall. This is why you deal with science, Charlton, not just of belief in what somebody tells you that you've read out of a book. Faith is about knowledge, Charlton, and intelligence, telling you to do the right thing. Don't sit there and preach to somebody about what they should not believe in, Charlton. Just believe in the word that they're telling you. I've always been enamored since I was a child that when I hear of a minister or a man of God saying that God spoke to me, and I've always wondered, how did he speak to him? Did he make a collect phone call? Because back then you could get collect phone calls back in those days. You know, or did he, send him a letter or whatever? Did he just call him direct? Or did he wake him up in the middle of the night? I've always wondered that. Why is God only speaking to certain people? And when those people that God is allegedly speaking to are giving out bad information, just like the president is, to those that are in mass who are supposed to follow you and believe you, and when you give them bad information that may cost someone their life or their health, Charlton, that's not a good messenger.
No, it's not a good message at all. I just want to say again, I will say thoughts and prayers are with the family of Landon Spratling. And he was not worried about the coronavirus when he went to New Orleans. A lot of people thought it was a hoax. And maybe that came out of the mouths of POTUS who thought it was a hoax too. But this gentleman, he has a family, a wife and 5 children, and now he's gone. And ironically, it wasn't his faith that saved him or a lack of it. It was the pandemic. And before I get into another topic that it means a lot to me, because as African Americans, I see, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to blame anybody, people do what they want. Some people don't like what we do. But I see so many of us, when we get access to a microphone, I see some guys that I admire, and all they talk about is basketball. I mean, it's almost disgusting. Is that all our brains can think about? Like, they listen to Laura Ingraham, Shut Up and Dribble. But this pastor's Caucasian, and he has 5 children and a spouse that are mourning him. But he, because of faith, Big C, and you can answer this with your own thoughts, a lot of us will say, I'm not going to the doctor. God's going to heal me. And I've seen that cost too many African Americans, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I have this thing that's called faith, that's called insurance. I have faith in my insurance coverage. My insurance coverage gives me the knowledge to take that faith to the hospital and take my body and insure it to those people, Charlton, who have the knowledge from their faith that have learned how to potentially treat whatever is ailing my body at that time, Charlton. So I put my faith into the power of knowledge, Charlton, that I'm educated enough to follow the signs of science, to follow that faith of science, Charlton, as they call it, a leap of faith. I'm leaping to the people, Charlton, who have been trained to take care of me.
That's true. So, and I know we're not a monolithic group, and I know as a young person, I played a lot of sports. I was raised in the church, but I also knew my doctor very well because my mother made sure we got to the doctor. So let me ask your thoughts, because you said something the other day, and I was thinking about it last night when you were talking about, Dabo Swinney, and our boy's going to get out there and play some football. We can't wait for the season to kick off. And there's churches that are having congregations, and people are shaking hands and doing everything as if science doesn't exist. And I really do feel, I was having a conversation with a Caucasian friend, and she was saying that, and I wasn't really offended by it. She was just being honest. She's a white lady. And she said, Charlton, I think too many black people, they believe so much in church because they don't have any power in the real world, so they hope that God's going to save them. I thought that was insulting, but do you think there's any fallacy or some truth to that, Big C? Your thoughts?
There's total truth to that, Charlton. If you go back to the days of slavery, what did black people have to believe in? All they had to believe in was the doctored up Bible that was given to them by the slave masters. If you ever visit the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C., Charlton, you will actually see the actual slave Bible that was given to slaves in those days. A lot of the things that are in the regular Bible are omitted from that, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so this is the only thing that slaves had to believe in. It was the only book that they were allowed to read. It was a doctrine version of the Bible. And so when you look at the history of black people in America post-slavery, Charlton, this is what they were guided through. The only gatherers that they could have was through church and faith. This is what they were taught. And they were taught to obey their masters through this book, Charlton. And so when you look at blacks and their faith, as far as what it leads through from religion, it's something that was ingrained in them through slavery. If you really understand the Bible, Charlton, and where slaves came from in Africa, Christianity did not exist in Africa during those times.
Yeah.
Blacks, slaves at that time, Charlton, that culture out of Africa believed in deities. They had their own gods of every culture and every season and everything that they needed. It wasn't one person that they believed in. When you look at the Bible and you think about the Bible is a King James version out of England, Charlton, is where it's written from.
Yeah.
Blacks did not exist in England at that time. If you look at the colonies of the United States, they came from England. So this was a way to brainwash the Africans that they brought over, Charlton, and it made them indentured servants into slavery was through this book. And so this was the only grasp that they had of American society was through that faith of this doctored up Bible that they were given.
And we know the New King James Version was rewritten in 1511. So this is where I want to lead this to, because I heard the United States Surgeon General is an African-American man. His name is Jerome Adams. Very, very smart man. Very well educated. And when I juxtapose, this is why I say I love the platform of Big C Sports, because nowhere am I hearing today what I'm going to talk to you about, because I think it can save some of our people. At least I'm hoping that it can, because we're going to disseminate that information. Jerome Adams, also President Donald Trump, they were saying oftentimes in United States of America, especially in our large cities, that African Americans, the coronavirus is wreaking havoc on our neighborhoods, and that in Chicago alone, they've seen 98 deaths. Well, 72% of them were for African Americans. That doesn't make any sense. They're only about 14%, actually about 30% of the population in Chicago. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, if you look nationwide through this pandemic, between 40 and 48% of the deaths in the United States have been in the African American community. 40 to 48% of the coronavirus-related deaths in the United States are of the African American community. And the reason for that disproportionateness, Charlton, in the African American society, in the black society in America, is because what people have fought against. Think about Obamacare.
Yeah.
When African Americans are disproportionately represented in the healthcare system in America, Charlton, not only that, when you look at the large numbers of workers in the healthcare system, they're disproportionately African American, Charlton.
Yeah.
Those people who have to go to work in the hospitals, who do all the layman jobs, the nurses, and all of these assistant jobs in the hospital, Charlton, they're disproportionately African Americans. And so they're more exposed to this pandemic than anybody else. So you're going to get a greater number of deaths percentage-wise from the black community than what you're going to get anywhere else. And to take that a step further, Charlton, who is American society fighting to get back on the playing field? Black people, Charlton. They're trying to get black athletes to go out and put themselves in physical peril with this pandemic still in place to appease white society, to give them an outlet. I don't see cries, Charlton, to say, hey, we got to get all these white kids out there playing soccer to keep America happy. We got to get them all out there playing lacrosse to keep America happy, Charlton. We got to get them all out there in those swimming meets to keep America happy. No, Charlton, we're hearing the media, sports media, mainstream media, everybody, even the politicians saying, hey, we got to get those black football players back out there on the field because they're going to be in close physical contact, not 6 feet apart, Charlton, not 6 inches apart, but body to body, passing body fluids back and forth between each other, breath between each other, Charlton. This is what everybody is crying for. So as we see the disproportionate of African Americans, actually blacks in America, being affected by this pandemic that's going on because they have lack of accessibility to health care, Charlton, and pre-existing conditions in America, this is the same thing we're trying to force black athletes back into. The NBA, the NFL, college basketball, pro football, everything, Charlton. We're trying to get black athletes back out there to put them in physical peril to appease white American society.
And that, to me, is what really makes me, and this is one of the reasons I love talking to you, because I talk to a lot of guys. I mean, I don't care what color somebody is, but I am disheartened by the number of African-American men. They can't wait to see the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN. And then POTUS himself, remember I told you over the weekend, he had called for 12 commissioners of sports leagues. He didn't call on the school teachers that are by the millions are out of work. He didn't call on the college professors that are by the hundreds of thousands out of work. He didn't call on the airline industry, the automotive industry. He didn't call on the restaurateurs that have people who are out of work. He called on the sports leagues to say, when can we get those boys back out there shutting up and dribbling for our entertainment? Think about this, Big C. I just mentioned the thing that happened in Chicago. As of April 5th, about 1,824 Chicagoans, they were confirmed. I think it was 1,824 out of 4,600 African Americans were the ones that had the COVID-19 virus. They were African Americans, compared to just 847 whites, 478 Hispanics, and 126 Asians. Now, I don't know how that number is higher, but I think you touched on something that I believe is so true, that oftentimes it's the service industries where a lot of African Americans are in the hospitals cleaning up. They're doing the things that maybe a lot of the mainstream people can take off work and not have to worry about it. And maybe they're coming more exposed to that because they have to. That make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, if you look at the service industry of the United States, it is largely served by minorities. You think about black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Charlton. They are the number one members of the service industries in America. When you look at hotel workers, Charlton, you look at restaurant workers, you look at these people in the service industry all around. You look at sanitation workers, Charlton. These are mainly held by minorities in America. So when you talk about the disproportionality of blacks getting this corona infection around the United States, it's because they're more exposed than the average person. You're not hearing of school teachers, Charlton, being exposed at the rate that African Americans are being exposed. When you look at the service industry as a whole, Charlton, and you look at the number of people in the service industry that have been infected with this coronavirus, Charlton, and this is why when they're saying that, so many people have been tested, but only this many people have it.
Right.
The people that are in their cars, Charlton, driving to these testing centers are not the civil workers, Charlton, in these facilities. They're not the restaurant workers. They're not the hospital workers. Think about the first people in line to be tested should always be the hospital workers.
Yeah.
The people the paramedics, the people that are on the front line of everything. Anybody who has to deal with the public on a day-to-day basis, those should be the people that the government is out there testing. But you got such a brazen president right now saying, hey, it's not the federal government's job to test people. Yet over a month ago, he said anybody that want to get a test, they can get a test. The test was available for everybody.
Yeah.
But when you look at the disproportionate numbers, Charlton, of the people who have this pandemic, it's because these are people who work in the public, who are in close contact and proximity with the public on everyday basis to earn a paycheck, Charlton. And these people are generally minority people in America. They're not the high-level executives, Charlton, that are out there crying to get the black people back out there to play. When you talk about the social distancing, how in the hell can you have social distancing in a sport that when you're asking people to have body-to-body contact?
Yeah, that is so true. I want to just bring this up because And I know we're not spokesmen for black Americans. Neither was Dr. King, neither was President Barack Obama. But I do believe that history will judge the Big City Sports Show as the only sports show in the universe that is socially conscious. And I'm speaking to all of our brethren, our black brethren, the sports athletes, whether it's LeBron James or Steph Curry or whoever you are, Charles Barkley, anybody in that business that talks more than just shutting up and dribbling. And I hope they will have a moment of consciousness, Big C, because when I hear this is important, I just want to bring it up. Think about this. In the state of Michigan, which is known, Detroit, that's the big city there, African Americans make up 14% of the population, just 14, but they account for 33% of the COVID-19 cases and 41% of the deaths, and that came as of Monday. And so with residents, about 23% of the cases recorded in Michigan, 28% of deaths according to data. So black Americans in Detroit, about 80%. In the city of Detroit, about 80% African American in the city altogether, and the surrounding suburbs. And they are disproportionately not getting the same health care. Milwaukee, nearly, I think, is the most segregated big city in the United States of America. And 81% of the positive cases have been African American. Doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what's going on, but I do know, this is why I say, for all of our black brethren that want to watch the Michael Jordan special, they should talk more about this because it affects their parents, their grandparents, them, and their kids. Having multi-million dollars in the bank does not isolate you. Does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it depends on the perspective that you look from. I mean, everybody in America right now is fighting for a paycheck. All of those guys who are on these networks are fighting for a paycheck. That is a way that they put bread on the table. They're concerned about themselves. They're concerned about their families. They're not out there being healthcare professionals. They're not out there being messengers. But when you think about it, if you just watch the shows, when you talk about what they're saying, I don't think you see any sports shows anymore, Charlton, sitting in a round table, sitting face-to-face with each other, 4 or 5 people sitting at a table. They're all doing Skype and these video conferencing on these sports shows. And so they're cognizant of how dangerous this is. But they have no problem calling for athletes, black athletes, to get together in mass group settings, Charlton, and have body-to-body contact.
Yeah. No, I think that's so poignant. So I love, at least I know history can judge us on the right side of that. Last thing I'll touch on with that, and I hope that more people will, Big C, it's heart-wrenching. The hard-hit Louisiana area, 70% of the people who passed away from COVID-19 are African-American. And despite African Americans making up only 32% of that state's population. And so I hope that programs like ours, going back to the great Dr. Martin Luther King, they marched for civil rights. But Dr. King was assassinated when he started talking about economic equality. You can sit in the same church with someone Caucasian. You can go to the same school. You might even live in the same neighborhood. But if you don't have access to health care, and POTUS at this moment when he says, I don't know why the African-American community is hit harder by this. Well, they're stripping away the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare, which means that you cannot be denied for a pre-existing condition. And we have guys can't wait to see the Michael Jordan basketball show. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I don't know what Michael Jordan show is coming on tonight. I don't pay attention to those things. I look at the health issues of America, and I look at the health issues of myself. But I'm not looking for some sports show to give me guidance in what's right and what's wrong and what's going on in America. And you have to be salient enough to let your mind know that sports show is meaningless. And if you gravitas to what they're talking about some past athlete, about what they did in the past instead of what's going on in the present, then you're the bigger fool than what they are in listening to the message. It's just like what I said earlier. Here it is, the biggest cry in America right now is how do we get these black people back together out on these playing fields where they're not practicing social distancing, where they're on top of each other physically, passing perspiration, breathing in each other's face. That's the biggest cry from society, talking about, well, we got to play games. But the people that are telling you that these athletes need to play games, they don't have the balls to sit face-to-face with each other, Charlton, or even be in the same room. They're social distancing by teleconferencing, Charlton, over the internet. They don't get in each other's face, but they're telling you all these black athletes need to get in each other's face and expose each other potentially to contacting this coronavirus. And then what happens if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these people test positive for the disease, Charlton? We saw what happened with the NBA when they had a couple players test positive, they shut the entire league down. So now that you know that players can test positive for this, here it is, you're trying to force these players to get back together again and potentially endanger each other once again.
Yeah, that to me is just amazing. And the reason I think it's important, Big C, because a lot of people, if they watch the news or even Google the news, then they would know this. And a lot of times our sports brethren, you wouldn't even know we're having a coronavirus pandemic other than our thoughts and prayers with somebody. I want to touch on another sport. I know you're not as much into the world of MMA as I am. I think you like more boxing. I like both. But UFC, the owner of UFC, the president, Dana White, believe it or not, he's planning to host weekly fights on a private island. I mean, it's just like the pastor from Virginia that passed away from COVID-19 because he thought it was a hoax. So he believed what came out of the White House when this first happened. And again, God rest his soul. And so now you have a promoter of an MMA fight. I think he made about $4 billion when this league was purchased, Big C. I know a lot of these UFC fighters, they don't get paid really that much money. The top guys do, but the guys at the bottom, they're just like fodder. And they're just like punching bags for the most part. And a lot of them don't even get paid unless they win. So how is the idea of going to an island where it's not regulated going to get people to go and jump in that business, in that octagon, where not only do you have pathogens flying around, you have blood, sweat, and tears, Big C? Your thoughts?
But aren't you buying into that just like everybody else, Charlton, by helping him promote those events that are going on in these isolated places, Charlton, by talking about it and praising what he's doing, by putting it on, bringing these fighters in, advocating for what they're doing, instead of saying, hey, stop, Dana, you're wrong. This is what's wrong. This is what's wrong with society. Those who are not putting themselves in harm's way are putting other people in harm's way, and that's what Dana White is doing. He's a monger, Charlton. It's all about the bottom line dollar for him, just like it is with everybody else when you look at this sports industry. How do we make our dollars? How do we make our dollars without these live events? We can't keep showing replays all the time. We feel the public is going to get tired of these replays, so we got to put other people in peril for us to make the money. Because he's not splitting the take from television or whatever with the fighters that are out there. He's going to give them a few $1,000s and say, hey, go on your merry way. Hopefully you didn't catch anything.
Yeah.
But he's selling it to you, and he's selling to other people who are going to promote and talk about the event that he's going on. One of the things that keeps sports going on television, on radio, or in any other outlet, Charlton, is the voice that carries it.
Yeah.
And when people talk about it, Dana White is not out there promoting it. Everybody else is promoting it for Dana White. Whatever media outlets that it's on and wherever you got the information from, that's part of the promotion for Dana White. He's not getting on TV saying, hey, I'm doing it here, here, here. He puts out a memo and everybody else carries the message for it. So Dana White is a very intelligent person. He actually removes himself from it because he gets everybody else to talk about it.
And I think, and I disagree with you on one extent. It would be like saying, don't talk about coronavirus and people won't know it exists. People do know it exists.
But everybody's talking about coronavirus.
Yeah.
We all know that coronavirus exists. It's just like I said earlier. Everybody on these shows are crying for all these black athletes to get back into the arena and do battle with each other. But they refuse to get in the studios together and do interaction with each other just feet apart.
Yeah.
But they want these black athletes to be on top of each other. So everybody's doing the promotion. I mean, when we think about a fight, an MMA fight in the battle, when we talked about the context of Chicago and you talked about the context in New Orleans and Milwaukee, and the disproportion of deaths with black people versus mainstream society, that's the same thing as Dana White throwing that news information out there and saying, hey, everybody else run with it for me and promote it, because I don't have to spend any money because I'm going to get everybody else to talk about it for me and get everybody else to pay for the pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I understand that too. I just disagree. I think one of the reasons a lot of people did come down with the infection is because no one in the community talks about it. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of my black brethren, I'm not being a monolithic group. I'm just saying a lot of people were even so to the point where they told me that black people don't get coronavirus. It's a white person's disease. And I said, that doesn't make any sense.
When you think about the number of people that are involved in an MMA event, whether you got to pack the house or nobody there and just the fighters in the ring, How many people are in that octagon, Charlton, versus the number of people that are on a basketball court, and even take us further, the number of people that are on a football field at the same time?
Yeah.
Which is the more heinous when you're talking about putting physical lives in peril, and who are everybody fighting for? To get the black guys back together on the basketball and football fields, Charlton.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think we've always been seen as a large source of entertainment, and there are times when you just got to do your part. At least for me, I want to do my part by going to the eye of the storm and telling guys that I know it doesn't make any sense, at least get a second opinion. We're going to...
If it doesn't make any sense, then that's talking to the commissioners of all the professional leagues, Charlton, saying it doesn't make any sense. When you talk about the commissioners and the number of bodies that are under their watch versus the number of bodies that are under Dana White's watch when it comes to one MMA event, you put on one football game, Charlton, that's more bodies involved in one football game than it is in all the MMA fights that Dana White could put on in an entire year. Because when you're talking about a college football game, when you got 100 athletes on each sideline, Charlton, 100 athletes on each sideline, we're not talking about a 6-foot distancing between them because you don't have enough field.
Right.
Not only that, you talk about all the staff and personnel that goes along. That's another 100 people with coaches and all the support staff that go on. So each one of those sidelines is manned with 200 people, 200 personnel, Charlton, that we're talking about for a football game. So we're talking about 400 people to be involved in a football game versus 20 or even 15. And I'm not discounting the lives in an MMA event, but I'm talking about the totality of the probability of spreading at a football game versus an MMA game. And you got the president calling for professional leagues to get back together. You're talking about college coaches getting the college game kicked off on time, not giving a damn about the black athletes out there, but they're giving a damn about the paycheck that they might be missing.
Isn't that amazing? We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And when we come back, I'm going to talk more about another sports league that's proposing something that's very hypocritical and highly improbable. We'll be right back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. And the apps that I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going with that. Also looking to launch a real estate listing channel in the spring of 2020. That's, of course, up in the air, according to Gavin Newsom, and letting people go back to doing what's called essential work. But the goal is 100 real estate brokers putting their properties on television, like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, also sports teams when they get a chance. I want to bring this up that we talked about African Americans being hit harder by this coronavirus pandemic than other groups, and I think it goes right back to the healthcare. A lot of people, if they don't have the insurance, they're not going to get in and get tested. They're not going to find out what's going on. To me, I think that's what it is. I don't think it's any genetic predisposition. That's just my opinion. But we talked about football. We talked about boxing. Major League Baseball, they're also itching to get back to work. And they're talking about putting 30 teams in the Phoenix area of Arizona this season playing in front of an empty ballpark. And you think about it, how is that going to matter if they're in a hot area climate? I think it's about 110 degrees. Oftentimes in the summer times down in Phoenix, Arizona. They can't play indoors, which is where the Diamondbacks play. What would be the point of that? If they're going to play it where it's hotter, they would have to play it indoors. Doesn't make any sense, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is what I'm talking about, Charlton, constantly, the cry to get athletes to go back out there and put themselves in peril for other people to make money off the sweat and potential health hazards of other individuals. And to go back to a point you were talking about with African Americans and black Americans being disproportionately underserved in the healthcare community, Charlton, it's because they have not had the means for that. When you think about the Affordable Care Act, Charlton, it was an opportunity for many black Americans to get health care.
Yeah.
And when you think about the labor force that many blacks and minorities support in the United States, especially the service industry, Charlton, those jobs did not allow for health care coverage in your job. And if they did, it was so cost prohibitive, you couldn't afford to have it taken out of your paycheck. So many black Americans, as well as minority Americans, went without health care. And this is the reason why you see so many of them in health peril now, Charlton. Not only that, poor diets, Charlton, because of the income bracket they were in. When you look at the areas of cities that they lived in, Charlton, they were underserved by having proper nutritional outlets as far as the proper amount of grocery stores in those areas, Charlton, where they couldn't get fresh produce and things of that nature. As far as from a nutritional value, Charlton, their dietary habits were very poor over the decades. And so when you look at the health conditions of many minorities, they didn't live in the suburbs. They lived in the inner city, so they were not subjected to the same nutritional value as those families who lived in the suburbs.
And I know, and speaking of that point, too, I remember growing up and where a lot of African Americans at least had a garden. Almost everybody I knew had a garden someplace where they could have collard greens or they could do okra and tomatoes and different things that came out of the ground, onions and all the garlic, a lot of good things.
You go to the inner city now,
there's
and
no
you
grocery
ask
stores.
the kid, where does milk come from? They tell you the grocery store out of the milk. They don't know it comes from a cow.
Yeah.
You ask them about certain fresh produce. They didn't know. They know of certain fruits and vegetables, Charlton, that come out of a can, out of the freezer compartment in certain stores, Charlton, and mainly canned produce because it will stay longer, but it's so sodiumized. When it's in a can, 22% sodium in those cans, it's unhealthy to start with, so it's really not a lot of nutritional value in it. So when you think about these kids that have lived in these concrete jungles their entire life, and very few of them have ever seen grass, and none of them have ever been to a farm, Charlton, so they couldn't tell you that an egg came from a chicken. They couldn't tell you that the milk came from a cow. All they know is what they've seen. You know, when you ask them about meat, they will tell you about lunch meat. They couldn't tell you about a steak. They couldn't tell you about a roast Charlton. So when you have not been exposed or had the opportunity to see these things, this is why the disproportion is when you look at black communities, Charlton, especially inner city kids who have never been outside the beltways that they live in to understand what nutritional value is in life.
You know, there's a thing called farm to fork here in Northern California where a lot of the farmers that grow natural foods would get together.
The largest farming area of the world. Go to Chicago that you spoke about earlier.
That's true.
And see how much concrete there is in Chicago and see how many farms there is in Chicago. New Orleans is the same way, Charlton. Dallas, you look at New York, you look at New Jersey, places where you don't even have a lawn. When people have never lived in a house, they lived in an apartment complex their entire life, these high-rise buildings. These kids will never know those things.
Yeah. Let me ask you a thought then, because I'm really, when I heard Surgeon General Jerome Adams, who's actually African-American man, he went to several colleges. I know he also went to Cal Berkeley. If you could speak to him, and what I'm going to ask you is something that maybe people get upset about, I don't care, but there's a lot of us that go to the churches and we ask the pastors to pray and ask the pastors to put on, these mega churches where they're broadcasting all over the world. I'm not saying it's up to them, it's up to us, but I want to do my part. What would you ask of Jerome Adams when he says that we're disproportionately affected, yet he's appointed by a man who's trying to kill Affordable Care Act and Obamacare? Does that make any sense, your thoughts?
Well, here's a guy who took a job, Charlton, hoping to make a difference. But when you're muzzled as far as what your job capabilities are, it doesn't make any difference who you are or what nationality you are. Jerome Adams is only an individual. He is not the spokesperson. He was not even the lead person on this coronavirus task force, so that lets you know what the president thought of him. He put somebody in who really didn't understand what health was all about in the nation. You're going to put the vice president instead of the
Surgeon General
who is in charge, the highest ranking medical officer in the United States, in charge of the task force, Charlton. So what can Jerome Adams say? He was mainly a face. You put a black face out there and say, okay, I'm serving the entire country because I got two black people in my cabinet. I got the Surgeon General and I got the Secretary of HUD. So I'm not disproportionate when it comes to serving black people in America. That's all the president did, Charlton. What Jerome Adams could do, you don't see him holding press conferences.
No.
He is muzzled as far as what his capabilities are in his job. He is not going to go out there and say anything anti to what the president is saying. Otherwise, he'll be fired like the other guys were fired today that the president got rid of. The president only wants people who are going to praise him. If you're not going to praise him, then sit in the back of the room and be quiet.
That's very interesting. So let me ask you another question then, because I know that our part, again, I care about the legacy that history says. So you're down in the heart belt of religion in the South. And I remember, I think you said this to me a while back, that I think you said football is more popular than church in some of those communities down south in the southern states. And you can't speak for everybody. So what message could we give? This is leading back to the white lady that told me, Charlton, a lot of black people are in the church because they don't have any power. And I disagreed with her. But what message would you give to some of our prominent pastors that speak all over the world about how to make that curve change for African Americans if the Surgeon General can't do it? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that was the only power that blacks had was the numbers in the church. That was the sanctuary for blacks since slavery. It's always been there. That's the only power. When you look at Martin Luther King that you spoke about him, his power was through the church, being able to gather those people together, Charlton, to get those people of that denomination to listen to him.
Yeah.
And so that's been the forefront of the black community ever since post-slavery, Charlton, is the church. And sports is a religion, especially football in the South. It is the biggest thing in the South. It is bigger than church. People let out church early on Sunday so people can be at home on time for the kickoff.
Wow.
There's no church ever held on Saturday because college football is being played on Saturday, and Friday you get very little church because of high school football.
Yeah.
It is a religion. And so when you think about people, and it's regardless of nationality, black,
Yep.
white, indifferent, Charlton,
Yep.
in the South, football is king. Religion is number two. People get together for fellowship through religion, Charlton, to hopefully find a common goal and a common end to things. But as we look at this pandemic, so many people still believe in faith, regardless of what nationality you are.
Yeah.
They look at faith, and this is the reason why they still want to have these gatherings. They don't always believe in science. If you look at the history of church and science, Charlton, they have not always meshed. It's
Yeah.
not going to change because of this pandemic. People are not going to give up their faith because of this pandemic. If you think about all the plight that has gone on in the history of the world, church has always been there. Science has always been something that everybody has not had accessibility to, but church is something that everybody has always had the ability to go to.
Isn't that something that they talk about? We pray for games, we pray before a game and after a game. And then in the Vatican, Pope Francis, he is holding churches to empty cathedrals, and we still have some people here in the United States that are telling people, come on, God's going to save you. My faith is going to protect me by the blood of Jesus. And I know that, to me, I'm a believer too, Big C. But I've been spoon-fed science. I believe they can both coexist.
You played sports growing up, didn't you, Charlton?
Yeah.
Did you pray before every game?
Yes, we did. We
Okay,
always
but
did.
Did you ever talk science before the game? No, you didn't.
No.
You prayed.
Yeah.
You prayed before the game. You prayed after the game, Charlton. No one sits there and talks science. You think about the players who get injured during a football game. Do they sit there? They go out there and they pray for the guy, don't they? They don't sit there and talk about the science of his injury. They talk about praying for the guy.
Yeah.
You even hear the broadcasters up in the booth talk about their thoughts and prayers with the players. They don't talk about a speedy recovery from the science.
Yeah.
They don't talk about that. They talk about praying.
That is very interesting, and I know that as far as what I can do, and I really appreciate your thoughts on that, because cultures are different. They do vary. But I want to make sure that for at least what I can do with my oratory is make sure that we bring that conversation to the light. We got to get our kids focused on science as much as anything else, especially
Charlton,
don't
I
argue
look
over
at it from
athletes.
this perspective.
Yeah.
And I played sports for a long, long time. Yes, I was part of that prayer before the game. I was part of that prayer after the game. But I also had 12 surgeries while I was playing.
Yeah.
And not one time when I was in the operating room pre-op, Charlton, did I hear anybody in the operating room sitting there saying a prayer.
Yeah.
They were making sure that they had all their ducks in a row as far as what their medical science had created for them and given them the knowledge to do to my body, okay?
Yeah.
This is what they did. They weren't sitting there holding prayer. I didn't see anybody holding up a Bible. I didn't see anybody getting down on a knee.
Yeah.
They were in a sanitary condition talking to me prior to knocking my butt out and doing what they had to do. They dealt with the science of it. They did not deal with the prayer of it.
Yeah. I think that's very salient because, as you know, in our communities, a lot of times we go, even when the politicians want to get the black vote, they go to the church. They don't go to the school or the university where people are learned. They go to the church so people can lay hands and hope that helps. And I understand that's why I think that's part of that pandemic that Jerome Adams talked about. I want to just go into this thought, how sports can really bring our society together. And I guarantee you don't find shows like doing what we're doing, Big C.
But tell me this about Jerome Adams.
Yeah.
How many times do you see Jerome Adams, or how much did you know about Jerome Adams prior to him becoming Surgeon General? How many seminars had you heard about Jerome Adams going around giving in the black community, Charlton? How many times did he go out and talk about the science of what he knew and what he had been educated in? Nobody knew anything about Jerome Adams till they saw him on television a couple of times with the president.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who's in the forefront, should be in the forefront of the black communities. He, as well as Ben Carson. You're talking about two educated medical people, one neurosurgeon and one in charge of the White House medical corps.
Yeah.
And here it is. How much do we know about these individuals? How often have they been out in the forefront of the black community, especially in this pandemic, Charlton? Wouldn't you think that they would be the first and foremost out there trying to educate the black community every day, regardless of what the president says, that they would be out there having large gatherings, educating people of the do's and don'ts and how to protect themselves?
Yeah, and I think you're right, and it was Jerome Adams that actually spoke about it, and then POTUS, his boss, who appointed him in 2017, said, I don't know, we're going to have to look into that, and Jerome Adams did come out and say that.
Have you seen Jerome Adams prior to this, Charlton?
No,
is what I'm asking.
No, I have not. Have not at all.
Oh, that's my point. Here's a guy, as you say, he was appointed in 2017.
Yeah.
Up until this pandemic, for the last 3 years, you and the black community have not known anything about him. And yet I love the statistics he puts out. That's great.
Yeah.
But where have you been for the last 3 years? Where were you at in January when this pandemic broke out and stepping up to the forefront and say, hey, in the African-American community, because I am one of you, I know that we've all been disproportionately served through the medical science of America and the healthcare system. But I want to get out here as an individual, as one of you, to let you know what you need to do as a culture to protect yourself.
That's very well said, and I know that people can't be muzzled, and if you speak, I guess the opposite of POTUS, then you'll be relieved from that position. I understand that too.
Even if he was to give up his position, Charlton, as the Surgeon General of the United States, he should have cared enough about his culture to go out there and speak, just like you say about us with this show.
Yeah.
He has a larger voice and platform than we would ever have.
Yeah.
If he was to have been dismissed from the administration, it's not being muzzled.
Right.
You have a fiduciary duty to your culture as a person, as a humanitarian, to go out there and be the voice for the voiceless, Charlton, and he has failed to do that.
Well, that's a very good point. I think he's making an effort now, and hopefully we'll see more of that.
But that effort that he's making is minimal.
Yep.
How many times, and like I said, he has not gone out like Dr. Fauci and spoken, Charlton.
That's true.
He has been very minimal about what he has done. I mean, he can say the numbers that anybody else is saying.
Yeah.
But you have to have some sensibility as a human. You have to have some compassion as another black man to a black man, saying, this is what I need to do to help my culture.
Yeah. And I think he's trying that, Big C, and I think he'll do even more of it. And I appreciate that. I do want to get on in the final 10 minutes. There is an ex-Major League Baseball player, just like medical. I mean, what do we trust more, faith or science? And there's a a former Major League Baseball player that's finishing medical school early so he can also help fight against this coronavirus. His name is Mark Hamilton. I know you know of him. He played in the World Series with the St. Louis Cardinals. He's trying to finish medical school early. He's played back in the 2011 season. He wants to get on the front line, and we started this show talking about health care. Now, here's a guy that's a former Major League Baseball player that's in medical school trying to finish up early so he can also become one of those first responders. To me, that's more important than watching the LeBron James or the Michael Jordan basketball feature. Talk about what athletes are doing in this pandemic. That, to me, is important, Big C. Your thoughts?
But see, Charlton, those people who are trying to fight this pandemic are not talking about the Michael Jordan and LeBron James feature. That is what you're doing as far as distracting people from what the reality is.
Yeah.
And as I look at the first responders and the medical workers that we have that are in existence today, you cannot discount what they've been doing, Charlton, because they've been there since day one. We're going to have medical professionals come online all the time. It's going to graduate from nursing school, from doctoral school, all of these things, Charlton, that are going to join the lines of people that are out there fighting it. But the more we sit up and talk about the past tense of sports, about who did what in years past and how they're going to have a highlight show on them, then you're being distracted just like everybody else as far as what the importance of this is in talking about a past tense athlete versus athletes that are struggling for their lives today. We have athletes that are infected by this disease worldwide that have been incubated in hospitals.
Yeah.
And so when we think about the importance of them versus somebody who played decades ago, that's where the real thought should be.
Yeah, and I agree very much, and that's why I know we can't please everybody. And for anyone listening, we don't have to agree on anything. I'm just saying for the guys who look like us, who do have a pulpit, no matter what platform is on, I know people listen, and I hope that the conversation that we're having will start to find a way to spill over into some of the mainstream conversations. We were talking about getting out there and performing, and how I heard an erstwhile athlete who's a broadcaster, covers Major League Baseball here in Northern California, and I heard him saying, early this morning, because I listen to a lot of guys that I've known over the years, and he was almost lachrymose giving a speech about, I can't understand what I'm going to do with my time. We got to get this game started again. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't go outside and do a lot of things. And we have over 10,000, actually over 12,000 deaths now, but it's still, and this guy was Caucasian, so it's not just for black men. There are still some people who are intellectually vapid when it comes to that. But I want to touch on, in the final few minutes, NHL Big C. There's Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner. He raised the possibility, kind of like what you were saying just the other day. He raised it that the regular season may not happen for NHL hockey, but they may try to figure out something if science lets them to get in the pursuit of Lord Stanley's Cup. Big C, your thoughts?
What is science going to let them do, Charlton? The only thing that science is going to let them do is that this pandemic has gone away. As I keep saying, you're talking about constantly putting athletes in peril. This is what everybody's doing. No one's talking about putting themselves in peril.
Yeah.
Everyone is talking about putting someone else's health in peril so that they can make money. And this is what the president says. Hey, they put all those guys out there, put their health in peril so that you people can make money.
Yeah.
This is about money. They're talking about getting the economy going. Understand what the president is saying. Economy. Billions of dollars are at stake when sports leagues are not playing, from collegiate to professional. It's all about money. It's not about the health of the individual. You can sacrifice every professional athlete out there, Charlton. There'll be another 100 of them come along just like the ones that fell by the wayside. And every era, Charlton, every decade, you see athletes come along.
Yeah.
And every decade, you see athletes disappear. Do you worry about the ones that are gone? No, you worried about the ones that are playing, because the greatest ones are always going to continue to come along. When Michael Jordan retired, everybody said, oh, there'll never be another Michael. Hell, Kobe stepped into play.
Yeah.
Oh, there'll never be another Kobe. LeBron stepped into play.
Yeah.
When LeBron's gone, Charlton, there'll be somebody else. And in every era, when Gordie Howe was playing hockey, oh, there'll never be anybody better than Gordie Howe. Next thing you know, there was Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
Then Mario Lemieux. Now Alexander Ovechkin. Baseball, the same thing. All the great players over the years. Now Mike Trout is the best one out there in baseball. So whatever era you want to look at in sports, Charlton, there'll be another decade that replaces the ones that were there before them.
That's always going to be a place. Just like boxing, we thought there was Liston, there was Ali, there was Tyson. And I want to say Floyd Money Mayweather, he's got a better record than all of them, in my opinion. I want to also, in how sports can bring our society together, and that's a platform that we have, but we can also, elucidate on other subjects too. Athletes in the Olympic Village in Tokyo, they could use their coliseums to house patients that are dealing with coronavirus. Remember how it took a while for the International Olympic Committee to say that we're not going to have the Olympics, and now even they've caught up to what the Big C Pause was talking about, using their facilities to help house patients, Big C, as New York's seen its highest death toll in one day. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, everybody's using facilities, makeshift facilities to house patients, Charlton. When you think about Olympic villages, they're normally dormitory rooms that are dedicated to a university that are in the vicinity after that is over. So you're converting everything worldwide to fight this pandemic.
Yeah, they are really doing that. And I hope and pray And again, it's just part of my instinct. I do believe in prayer, but I believe in science, like my right hand and my left hand, they're both important, and I want to make sure that I get that message out there. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. And the app that I really love is by Google. Our Alexa, just say Google. Our Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. I love the fact that you do it from 3,000 miles away. I think all of mainstream TV is doing that, Big C. Also launching the real estate listing channel in the spring of 2020. If Governor Gavin Newsom lets us do that, really looking forward to that too. Big C, in a little bit of a light note, I know that everybody has to find a way to keep themselves healthy, to stay, blessed and highly favored, whatever it is. Take our medicines, go to our doctor's appointments. There was one story today that happened with Russia. Okay, I know you love your friends over in Russia, Big C. Now, Russia denies claims that they were bribing FIFA for World Cup, and I believe somebody was paid like $5 million. Would you believe they paid them in offshore banking accounts? So how is it that Russia can get to people faster than this stimulus packet of $6 trillion, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, anybody can bribe anybody that you want. It's just like when you had the president fire the inspector general, the man who was supposed to oversee the money that was supposed to be allocated out for American citizens.
Yeah.
Somebody who had oversight, who was an independent individual, Charlton, and the president did not want him in charge anymore because he didn't want him to know how much money he was going to be skimming off the top.
Yeah, his name is Glenn Fine, the inspector general, and they didn't. POTUS wanted to bring his own people in. It's still about, like Kushner told us, he said, those are our PPEs. That's not for the country. They're ours, for their own underground bunker. I know everybody has their own way of looking at politics. It's just amazing to me how when Russia wants to get something done, whether it's an election or whether it's paying off a bribe, they do it fast. And we still haven't had, as far as I know, any business owner that said they received money. They're going online and they're being hung up on, told the system's too crowded, you got to call back later. Does that make any sense, Big C? Your thoughts?
It makes a lot of sense in America, Charlton. We live in a country of bureaucracy. We live in a country of taking care of those who have. And when we think about the small businesses of America, Charlton, those are 80% of the income of America. They produce 80% of the income for Americans. As we talked about, a lot of those frontline workers, the disproportionate salary people, especially in the black community, Charlton, They work for small businesses. When we think about the service industry, 90% of the service industry in America, Charlton, is small businesses. And when those small businesses go by the wayside because they don't get stock buyback options that the large corporations are getting, that's the reason why they can't get the money.
And the money and the health is always important. I know that we talk about money, we talk about health, we talk about things that make everybody better. I know you got some things you got to take care of tomorrow, so I really appreciate it you coming on to the show today. And before I close, I wanted to ask you one more thought on what you would say, not to POTUS, because we know it doesn't matter, but to Jerome Adams or anybody else who can make a difference. I know Oprah Winfrey gave out $10 million. I know our pastors are trying to save souls, but when they get sick, they also go to the hospital. They don't go to the church. We all got to pass that message. What one more thing in the last 30 seconds would you like to see Jerome Adams do more of as the United States Surgeon General? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, as I spoke about earlier, Charlton, unless you're going to be a spokesperson, why say anything at all? It's nice to be a figurehead standing behind a podium, just sitting there looking like a bump on the wall, Charlton. But if you have all this knowledge that can help people, and especially people of your culture, Charlton, why are you sitting there and being shackled?
Yeah.
Slavery ended 400 years ago. So why are you sitting there letting yourself be shackled in America in 2020, Charlton, and letting what's happening to your people happen, and you standing by being quiet?
That sounds very well said, and I hope and believe that he will do more. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, what I'm looking forward to is that everybody's talking about the games need to be played. If you believe the games need to be played, stop practicing social distancing. Put your butts back together in those studios. Sit face to face with each other. Take the risk yourself first before putting an athlete out on the field.
Very well said, and you can always hear it every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, at Big C Sports. Has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and the good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.